Hey there everyone, this will be my 4th video. I'm Plaster Dragon, but you can call me Chuck. I'm offering this as a reluctant response to Epydemic 2020's video in defense of objective morality. In a recent exchange, Epydemic was unsatisfied with my requisite criteria for belief in God. I want empirical evidence testable by repeatable experiment. He wanted to present a deductive argument. I anticipated that the argument would take a philosophical bent and depart rapidly from reality, so I told him I wasn't interested for a couple of reasons. First, such arguments almost always contain flaws or jumps to conclusions, and second, they hardly ever argue for the actual deity the person worships, but for some sort of nebulous supreme being, and I find that disingenuous. If one believes in Jehovah, one should be presenting a case for Jehovah, and not something which could be any number of gods. I ultimately find such arguments to be pointless diversions, and I find those who get all wrapped up in such fantasies nonetheless come back to reality rapidly when an actual real-world concern rears up. As Signor Leonato said in Much Ado About Nothing,
"For there was never yet philosopher that could endure the toothache patiently."
Epydemic 2020 continued to harp on my criteria for belief, which I found annoying since I didn't harp on his. Ultimately, to get him to leave me alone, I offered to watch one video that explained his deductive argument. The one he linked me to was In Defense of Objective Morality. So I watched. I was not impressed, and by the end I was downright annoyed. Almost the entire video was spent explaining what objective morality was and why it was real. I therefore spent almost the entire video saying, so what? Finally, Epydemic got to the argument he had promised me. It was a logical syllogism. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist, therefore God exists. So basically, Epydemic spent 8 minutes and 10 seconds trying to demonstrate premise 2, and no time at all trying to demonstrate premise 1. Apparently, I'm just supposed to accept that as true. Okay, so of course the first thing that comes out of my mouth when I saw this premise was, says who? I don't actually care who says so. The argument's most important premise isn't that objective morality exists. It's this unsupported nonsense. I think it quite likely that what Epydemic describes as an objective moral code can exist without God. And speaking of that, see this part, God with a capital G? That refers specifically to the Christian God. So what Epydemic really means is this. And again, I have to ask, says who? Why is it only the Christian God that is requisite for objective moral values? Why not, Allah? The premise seems just as valid. Or the Roman goddess of justice? Seems like she probably has a say in morality. How about the Native American deity, the Great Spirit? He embodies harmony with nature and others. Surely that encompasses morality. Therefore, to properly capture the premise, I think we need to be honest that we aren't talking about a specific God, as opposed to one that sets a moral standard that objective morals could be based on, which could be many of the known deities and an infinite number of unknown ones. Which means we really aren't arguing for the Christian God, are we? Hardly seems relevant given that the entire premise is unsupported anyway, but it's necessary to point out. Why? Because these are exactly the sort of things I told Epydemic made me discount such arguments. Remember? Okay, so now that I've got that out of the way, I'd like to touch on some of the other things in the video that I had problems with, beginning with subjective versus objective truth. In the video, one example given of a subjective truth is a person stating broccoli tastes good, versus something that can be seen. The argument being that broccoli tastes good is a subjective truth because it's true for one person and not another. But two people will see the same thing if they look at something. If we both look at a pile of broccoli, that's an objective truth. It's not as if one of us sees broccoli and the other sees a duck. But of course, Epydemic is mixing up two different ideas here. What he is calling subjective truth is simply personal opinion. Plastered Dragon thinks broccoli tastes awful is not a subjective truth. It's as true for you as it is for me. Personal tastes don't strike me as any sort of truth at all. Epydemic seemed to think that vision was special and could only be objective truth, but it's clear this misconception of opinion as truth can be easily extended to sight. Lily Sobieski is beautiful. This is based on sight, and yet it is a matter of opinion. We can both look at Lily and see the same person, and yet have different opinions. The actual flavor of broccoli is probably as similar to two people as the visual image of Lily Sobieski would be. They may have different opinions, but that doesn't mean they each have their own version of the truth. And by objective truth, Epydemic seems to be referring to facts, that which can be independently verified. But there's already a name for objective truth. Truth. Which brings us to subjective morality versus objective morality. Epydemic doesn't actually, if memory serves, use the term subjective morality, but it's implied. He holds we have a priori morality, which is innate, a moral sense we have without being taught it. This is what he calls objective morality. He goes on to say that you can be taught morality in addition to, and sometimes contrary to, your innate morality. This is a posteriori, or learned morality. Epydemic essentially argues that apparent differences in moral codes across humanity are the result of learned morality, implying that we all have the same innate moral code at birth. Ultimately, he associates this innate morality with the Christian God, which is of course going to get him into trouble, since we aren't born with an innate tendency to keep the Sabbath holy, and so forth. Much of Christian morality is actually subjective. You learn it from all the usual suspects. Anyway, it wouldn't surprise me if there is an innate moral sense. There's already a scientific concept that covers innate behavior all members of a given species are born with. Instinct. It's not surprising to me that all the members of a species are born with similar innate behavioral codes and characteristics, given they are all genetically similar and come from a close common ancestor. Epydemic goes on to attempt to forestall objections that objective morality can't be true because it is the product of evolution. I can't see a person making this objection simply because the objection doesn't make any sense. If it's the product of evolution, clearly it's real, so what's the problem? Or to put it more simply, so what? But there is an objection worth making here, and it's even based on evolution, but it doesn't have anything to do with the second premise of Epydemic syllogism. It has to do with the first premise. If evolution leads to innate behaviors, and our moral sense is our internal neural mechanisms prodding us towards advantageous behavior, then there's really no reason to invoke some sort of infinitely complex supreme being to explain the presence of our innate moral sense. If we're going to agree that innate behaviors are the product of evolution, Occam's razor will neatly trim away any additional unnecessary complications we try to add on without any evidence. I was exceedingly unhappy with Epydemic's video, and I remain mystified how anyone who presents arguments for deistic beings would put any stock in the Bible. Consider. I remember the first time I saw the aurora borealis. The whole sky turned red, and I stood in awe of the thousands of miles of glowing waves of charged particles in the atmosphere. And yet that's nothing compared to our amazing and immense world with some 197 million square miles of land area. And yet that's a mere speck compared to our magnificent sun, 93 million miles away and 864,000 miles in diameter. And the sun is but the crown jewel in a solar system full of amazing planets, and stretching perhaps 9 trillion miles from end to end if you include the Oort cloud. And our sky is filled with gorgeous clusters of stars like the Pleiades 2.6 quadrillion miles away, a distance so vast it's not conceptualizable in the human mind. And yet it is dwarfed by the average galaxy. This gorgeous beauty is the Andromeda Galaxy, 14.9 quintillion miles away, containing billions of stars and who knows how many worlds. And yet it is but one of trillions upon trillions of galaxies. That implies a universe with immense numbers of worlds, and certainly many worlds with life on them, spread out across impossibly vast reaches of space. The observable universe alone extends 273 sextillion miles in every direction we look. Compared to this inconceivably vast expanse of space, we are infinitesimal. We, our planet, our star, even our entire galaxy could disappear, and the universe wouldn't skip a beat. My image, even reduced to a single pixel against this background, would be hopelessly too large. Definitely not to scale. Now imagine a single being capable of creating this entire cosmos. Such a being would be so fantastic, it would be utterly beyond our understanding. And yet, you are convinced that this being loves me personally, is highly interested in what I do on Sundays, is deeply concerned about my penis and what I do with it, doesn't want me to feel lust for women in direct contradiction to his supposed design of my biology, and will burn me forever if I disobey or disbelieve in him. The being that created the unfathomably immense. These constitute his concerns? How would I describe such beliefs? A being as vast and complex as this incredible cosmos is far beyond the pathetic tribal deity thought up by Bronze Age goat herders. His essence is not going to be captured in the scribblings of primitive desert nomads. Furthermore, a being this immense can't be logically pinned down based on the evolved instincts of one insignificant species on one planet lost against an eternity of space. Your philosophy can't capture it. Indeed, if you are trying to explain this amazing cosmos with mere Bronze Age gods, or any gods a mere human mind can dream up, you are thinking too small. Scale up your thinking. Or don't. If believing in your God brings you happiness, I'm all for it. But if it's supposed to be an article of faith, stop trying to deduce his existence, or prove it to me with philosophical wranglings. The full extent of the cosmos is beyond human conception, and your God is supposed to be greater. You can't frame him in your arguments if he exists at all. As for me, there's no evidence he does exist, so I'm quite happy where I am. And since I'm happy with my worldview, I'll thank you to allow me my happiness, just as I'm prepared to allow you yours. Thanks for watching.